think we are ready to go. So, hello everyone, good evening, welcome to spring. Yes, we made it. We have made it to spring, folks. Isn't that amazing? Winter is over, and there's nothing way to say goodbye to winter and hello to spring than another wonderful slideshow presentation from your friends at the Arrow Lakes Historical Society. My name is Kyle Cush. I'm the archive technician at the Arrow Lakes Historical Society, although I don't answer emails. Tonight's show is MONASHEE Marches and Selkirk Springs, and that's what we're all about here. If I seem a little rattled, it's just because I spent literally the past half hour rebuilding the entire show, and I think I got it ready to go with about 4 minutes to spare. So, I hope you all can hear me. It looks like my levels are all right. I hope I'm not echoing. If I am echoing, please let me know. I will give it about 50 seconds, since we have about 50 seconds of lag. But I think we're good to go. Before we start, I just want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Sonics people. And that's where I'm broadcasting from today, overlooking the beautiful Upper Arrow Lake, right as the sun goes down. Thanks to daylight savings time, which might be permanent from this year out. Who knows? Yeah. Alright, we sound fine. We are good to go. Thank goodness. Alright, so one thing that you will notice is you'll see lots of things underlined, and that's because this is a completely different program, and it wants to spell check all of my captions, and there just isn't enough time to go through them. So you are going to see those red underlines on a lot of captions tonight, unfortunately. So that is the one little bug that we have. So I want to start by showing you some of the newest arrivals. And since I put this together a few days ago, we've even had more, so a couple shows from now, we've got even more great stuff for you. But I call this section This Just In, and it looks as though it's changed the color on the This Just In, so it's kind of hard to read, but it is there. I want to start off by just saying that a historical society is nothing without the volunteers and nothing without the kind people who donate their materials, whether it be from their families or from themselves or from their offices or what have you. And a wonderful lady named Rona Archer over on the island gave us a fantastic collection of postcards that came from her grandfather, who was the son of one of the early druggists, pharmacists at Arrowhead at the turn of the century, H.E. Wallace. And all you postcard heads might know that name, because he himself had many postcards produced for sale in his store. Just reading the chat here. Good job saving the show. I don't know if I saved the show, but I thank you very much, regardless, Trevor. This is a great postcard of downtown Arrowhead. This is sometime in the 1900s. And it just shows you how busy Arrowhead was around that time. This is when Arrowhead is at its peak, almost 1,000 people. And you just see the size of the hotels. That's the Lakeview Hotel and the City Hotel. Off to the left. The City Hotel would be the dark hotel at center. Lakeview would be the one with the giant turret in the middle. And then you see right below Front Street is where the wharf and the CPR line, Canadian Pacific line, are. And then looking way from the other side of downtown Arrowhead. So this is looking from the tracks, from the edge of town, looking back at town. As you can see, Arrowhead from CPR tracks. This is a great postcard of the hospital at Arrowhead. And we always show photos of the Arrow Lakes Hospital in the Cusp. But this, this is basically a Victorian mansion. Quite an ornate hospital. Again, hospitals with wooden stairs probably wouldn't fly nowadays, but so it goes. Beautiful looking building, regardless. As you can see, the postcard's not in perfect condition. Another postcard was glued onto it at one time, evidently. This postcard, however, was in perfect condition. This is an immaculate shot of the Arrow Lakes Lumber Company mill on the waterfront of Arrowhead. And those are all the bunkhouses where the workers lived. Arrow Lakes Lumber Company was also, if I've shown in previous shows, images of the log railway that ran at Galena Bay. And they were the outfit that ran that log railway. And some of you more intrepid hikers may have even seen the old railway trestle that stood in the woods for about a century before it collapsed a few years ago. And we are fortunate to have pictures of that in various states as well. This, what a great shot this is. I love this shot. This is the Ss Bonnington at Arrowhead. Bonnington would have been brand new because the Wallace family lived at Arrowhead between 1905 and 1913, and the Bonnington was launched in 1911. So this postcard has to be between 1911 and 1913. And we see shots of the Bonnington at the Cusp and shots of the Bonnington sailing on the lake, but actually taking off from Arrowhead. I've never seen this shot. It's very great. This one's a bit more modern. In this collection of postcards from the Wallace family, amongst all these old postcards, you had a more modern one. This is of the Castlegar and Robson ferries. And I say ferries because, yes, they ran back and forth. They alternated. And because we happen to have one of our main volunteers who not only grew up in Robson during this time in history, but whose brother actually worked on the ferry, we can date this pretty much exactly to 1963, 1964. And way in the background of the photo, you can see the steam and smoke coming out of the Selgar pulp mill to give you an idea of where the ferry was in relation to the Selgar mill. Of course, this ferry has long since been replaced by the Robson Bridge, and one of these ferries was actually taken up to Arrow Park to become the Arrow Park ferry that was just replaced last year. So I really want to thank Rona Archer for that wonderful donation. This was brought to us by our vice president, Annette Devlin, who is our connection for Edgewood and Folkier Needles material. And so many people have been kind enough to let us just scan and then return their photos so that we have copies of them. And I used a photo of Miller's Hardware being burned in the Our Colored Passbook, but I've never actually seen this entire sequence until Annette brought this in a few weeks ago. And again, you can actually see the personnel there, as they light the building on fire. Of course, this is during the clearing of the Edgewood town site in advance of flooding from the Hikini side dam. And of course, the shot of the children standing there in front of the store watching as the building goes up in flames. It's very dramatic. And now we actually know who the children are. It's the Bargery and Williams families that were standing there. Sharon Montgomery, who of course ran the Cusp Museum for so many years, and of course her passion are our indigenous people in this valley, the Sinaiax Nation, and she has brought up with her from the museum a large collection of photos that originally came from one of my childhood mentors, Bill Robinson, who actually would take me aside on lunch breaks in grade 6 and grade 7 and, just talk to me and teach me about local history. This next set of photos that you're going to see here, is from a trip that I guess he took to the BC archives. We assume, we don't know for sure, but we assume that this is a trip he took to the BC archives and where he went to take photographs of the collection of the Edgewood family, who found numerous indigenous artifacts in the beaches and around Edgewood. And you can see just an amazing amount of spears and arrowheads and grinders and knives here. Fantastic. Yeah, more grinders and pestles. And there's so many photos where this came from. I can't wait to scan them all to show you. So we know that he would have went there, judging by this date, either in September or June 1977. Just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. This is great. This is an actual mortar and pestle. And you can actually see the depression and the stains within the giant mortar and then the pestle that goes with it. And just for size comparison, you can see the little notepad they've placed next to it in the middle. Also in Bill Robinson's collection were a number of photos that he had duplicated from the collection of Bert Harridge, the longtime member of Parliament. And many historians and indigenous researchers will be well aware that Bert Harridge had a fair amount of material on Sinixt Lakes people. And in many cases, it's our only known photographs of certain objects or certain people. This is a fantastic image of a birch bark sack that Lakes people used for carrying fruits and berries. That's one thing. People growing up today would probably have no idea that you could actually take birch off a tree and make a functional object of it. We're so disconnected from our landscape at times in our modern society. This is one that Bert Harridge remembers some people using remembers people seeing using this actual basket around 1908, collecting fish on the lakes. And then there's this shot. Of course, a couple of shows ago, I had that awesome shot of the family in the sturgeon nose canoe. This is another shot of a Sinixt family on the sturgeon nose canoe that Bert Harridge took in 1909. And again, never seen this photo before, so I'm so happy that this part of the collection has now been reunited with the archives, so we can preserve shots like this. And I don't know who this is. Sharon, you're watching over in our socially distanced audience over at the archives. Maybe you might know who this is. Someone out there watching. But just a very rare and so important shot. Such an important shot. And like I said, we've since I put this show together, even in the past few days, we've had when I say I'm searching through hundreds of photos right now, I'm searching through hundreds of photos right now. I've got a lot of work ahead of me the next few months, so you'll get to see those in the future shows. But we will move on now from the original people of the mountains to the mountains themselves in a section we call or I call, since it's just me here alone, Mountain Splendor. When you start with Mountain Splendor, one of the first collections I usually go to is the Hans Lu collection. He captured so many amazing mountain moments, especially around the Burton area. And this is him sitting in a meadow, and the view is looking across the Snow Creek Valley to the Valhallas east of Burton. And just look at how many mountain peaks there are in the background. It's stunning. This is actually a 5-photo panorama. So just and if you were to turn this photo over, you would see that it's about 2 feet long, and it's actually held together with, just individual pieces of tape. So, but it's an amazing, amazing panoramic shot. That would have taken hours of hiking to get to. 1965. This is a bit north. Now we're on top of Scalping Knife Mountain behind Arrow Park, and we are looking north towards the Cusp in 1962. So that field that you see down in just below center is the Morton Ranch. That is now where McDonald Creek Provincial Park is. Of course, the Morton property, one of the thousands that were expropriated. You can see the original Highway 6 winding its way through the forest, and then just above center, Cusp and the Kuskonex Creek Delta. A view of Cusp that most people will never, ever, ever see. Hans Lu was a member of the Burton Rock Rollers, which were a group of Burton residents that went out and collected rare gems. So, just to the east of Scalping Knife Mountain is Mountain Meadow, and which we all see every day as we stand. I'm looking at Mountain Meadow right now, and a lot of people have no idea what that's called. But Mountain Meadow is what you see if you're looking at the Cusp waterfront and you stare straight ahead into the lake. Mountain Meadow's just off to the left of your view. And there's a little tiny lake on there, as you can see, where the rock rollers have gathered. And this is the results of some of their gem finding efforts. This is Walter Isaacs, who was one of the few residents of the original Watchand Mennonite settlement that actually stuck around in the valley back in the 1910s. And he wound up settling in Burton and was a good friend of Hans Lu, and also a member of the Rock Rollers. As you can see here on this display, which is 1968, and you'll notice the Burton Rock Rollers, I guess you would call it sign or plaque in the background, and it's got the names of all of these members of the Rock Rollers, and some of those are pretty big Burton and the Cusp names. I can see Carl and Joan Cray, and I can see we've got Walter Isaacs, we've got Frank Zobel, and Mary McCormick, and just a great Jack Kelly. And you can actually see one of Hans's panoramic photographs in the middle, right above all the gems they collected. Another great shot. This is an unnamed, as far as we know, Alpine Lake. I've never found a name for this lake, but this is on the slopes of Mount Simons, big ledge. So if you were on the Cusp waterfront, instead of staring straight ahead, you now turn your way east and you look, not east. You turn your way northwest to the other side of Saddle Mountain to the north, and Mount Simons is that shallow sloping mountain to the north of Saddle Mountain. So this is where that lake is. And again, just an absolutely pristine Alpine Lake. So this is that same lake looking down from the other side now, from above. This is a more recent shot, although not that much recent. It's 1969 in Huffy Hewitt. Another person with amazing collection of mountain photo shots. Again, these are shots that most people will never see in person. It takes a lot of effort to get up there. And then atop the big ledge, in the Alpine Meadow on top of Big Ledge. And this would be a shot from my predecessor, Milton Parent. Also, on the slopes of Mount Simons is a lake with a name, and that's Paint Lake. And it's so named for the mineral deposits on the slopes of the mountain above it. And what a tranquil scene. I'll show you some of these mineral deposits here. In this next shot, you can see the top of the big ledge, and then the iron or deposits on the side, leaching down the side of the hill by a creek into the lake. Hence the name, Paint Lake. It was a place where you could, where native people would go and gather ochre and pigments. And Trevor says he's been up to both of those lakes, so that makes you an achiever. You have automatically done more than 99% of the people who actually live around here. Like me, I've never been up there. I really should one day. And I mentioned Huffy Hewitt, and there he is right there, 1974, standing on top of those mineral deposits. What an amazing natural wonder. Also, just in, Cheryl Truax brought in a set of photos. It was actually two sets of photos taken the same day. One was a set of photos of the 408 Tactical Helicopter Squadron receiving the key to the Cusp in 1990. And then the others were a set of aerial photos taken during a helicopter flight with the 408 by Harvey Truax. And one of those shots is this shot of... Did you know that there's a lake on top of Saddle Mountain? Well, not all the way on top, but on the slopes of Saddle Mountain. And it's just at the northeast corner of Upper Saddle Mountain, which is taller than the actual Saddle Mountain, by the way, in case you didn't know. To give you an idea of where this would be located, just off the map to the top would be Bayview. So this is just out of sight to the people of the Cusp as you look from the village. It's hidden behind that first little hill. Speaking of Saddle Mountain, we go from the 1990s to the 1920s with a party of four atop the Saddle Mountain Lookout. Bessie McWhirter, that's Bessie Vaughn, Madge White, Flo Dilley, and then Bay Brown, who was the fire lookout atop Saddle Mountain that summer and had a 6 to 8 hour journey from her home in Crescent Bay to the top of Saddle Mountain. And then we go back even further. This wonderful alpine meadow shot atop Mount Hillman, which is just north of Ferguson. And we don't know who these people are. The photo comes from the Crawfords, the legendary Arrowhead family who ran the Union Hotel and the General Store. What a magnificent shot. And when you think that they hiked up there in those long dresses, it's even more outstanding, the effort it takes to get a shot like that. No ATVs in those days. Also in that part of the world, Mount McKinnon, which is north of Camborne. And this is Harry LeBeau hiking through the rock fields in the Alpine Meadows on the side of the mountain to get to Teddy Glacier. There's a mine at Teddy Glacier. But those poor horses do not envy their hooves afterwards. we are so thankful for the support we've been getting for these shows. This is the fourth one that we've been doing since we moved to YouTube in the COVID era. And so normally I would get feedback right after the show from the audience, but now you can watch them anytime you like, which is so awesome. If you're watching this live or if you're watching this later, we're so happy to have you. And we love the feedback we get. I think it's so cool when people just come up to me on the street and say, "Oh, I saw your show. It's so great," and humbling. And what's cool is when you really gotta put this though. I'd like to see a photo of this. I love requests. It gives me ideas. It gives me an idea of what people want to see. And so when certain retired general store owners come up to me and say, "Hey, I love, we watched all three of your shows and they're fantastic. Could you get some Alton photos in there?" A light bulb goes in my head. Yes, I can get some Alton photos for you. So, Ken, this section's for you, and it's called Dutch Connections. The whole Arrow Lakes Valley has strong connections to the Netherlands. 1900s and 1910s saw large waves of agricultural immigration from the Netherlands, particularly from the eastern part of the Netherlands near the German border. One of the first Dutch immigrants to the Cusp area, Brow specifically, was Hendrik Alton. There's actually a town called Alton in the eastern Netherlands. And this is him in the Netherlands, not too long before he immigrated. And it's a classic example of chain migration because one family would come, tell their relatives back home in the old country what they found, and other families would follow afterwards. And a lot of these Dutch families all intermarried and built these family connections that are still around today. You can probably trace 5 or 6% of the entire population of the Arrow Lakes today can probably be traced to the people that you see in these photos. It's quite amazing. This is a shot of Hendrik Alton with his wife, and then Joe Schelling and Thelma Henke. And they're on a speeder car in Browse. And what a classic old tiny shot. I really like that one. Here he is again, logging with Fred Wensley. Another, if you know Wensley Creek, where the cross-country ski trails are in Browse, of course, that would be Fred Wensley. This is either Browse or Summit Lake, somewhere in between. Again, the size of the trees that you just don't see nowadays, as we're second and third and even fourth growth. This is the wedding of Ed, Munn, and Henrietta Alton in the Cusp, the 8th of May, 1924. Hendrik Alton House was on what is now called 7th Avenue. Just sort of across from the school board house. And another house that Hendrik Alton built is still there today. Pearl Ryan's house, which is a lot older than all of the houses around it. It was pretty much the first one built in that neighborhood. So this house is in that same area. And again, I don't know everybody in that photo, but I can imagine, or don't have their names, but I can imagine a lot of prominent Cusp residents in that one. So many. I could just go on forever. Of course, Hendrik Alton's brother is Carl Alton, who was here for about 15 years before moving to Vancouver at the end of the 1910s, and so that is his family there on the left. In the center, we saw Henrietta Alton on the speeder car. There she is in 1939. And then Wilhelmina Alton, Minnie Alton, wound up marrying into the DeGans family of Edgewood. And that is a shot of Minnie and Leonard DeGans in 1918, and that shot is taken at the Alton house in the Cusp. But like I said, the Degans are associated with Edgewood, and this is a shot of the Degans and Hop families in the Fire Valley north of Edgewood, 1912. Again, the apologies for all the red lines under the captions. Like I said, I had to spend a lot of time rebuilding this, so no time for spell checking to get rid of all those lines. But it does bring attention to the names, doesn't it? Tamara's asking, would that now be Pearl Foco's house? That would be the same property. Yeah, because both of those houses, that one and the one that came next to it, were Henrik Alton's houses, and so it's the second one that's Pearl's house now. So, and of course, between the Degans and the Hops, I mean, and of course, as I mentioned in the previous slide, married into the Altons, right there, just a huge amount of people in this valley come from those families. In fact, there's actually a fairly large Alton genealogy site online that you can look up, and I'm not kidding when, as I mentioned before, probably 200 residents that are around the Hero Lakes Valley to this day are on that site. And when you're talking about a valley that only has 5,000 people, that's a lot. There's the Hop family there. This is a year after the previous photo, so this house is fairly brand new. Helena Hop, Joe Hop, Bill Hop, and Bob Hop. Of course, I couldn't find a photo of Ken, but I did find a photo of Lyndon Alton. This is Lyndon Alton in the Cusp Bugle band in 1940s, 1950s, thereabout. And I found a shot of Henry Alton. So, Henry Alton was the second mayor of Cusp, the first one to actually use the title of mayor, first elected mayor. And as you can see, this is the brand new Cusp Waterfront Walkway, 1968. So the railing is up, but of course they wouldn't pave it for another 20 years. But and so and as you can see, it's so fresh, that cement barrier that's on the waterfront, that the old CPR workshop that I've used in so many slides over the years is still there on the waterfront. It wouldn't be gone for another year or so. I couldn't find one of Ken. I did find one of Kelsey, so haha. Sorry, Yeller. So, again, dating myself, I went to school with all these people. This is an awesomely adorable shot of this class of young tykes dressed up as Cabbage Patch Kids for the Cusp Figure Skating Club Carnival, March 1984. And the costumes would have been made by Ingrid Friedenberger, who of course was Ingrid Dieterman. That's another Dutch family, although that's a second wave of immigration that came after World War II. But just goes to show you, nobody really talks about it, but how strong the Dutch influence in this part of the world is. And Megan Gustafson, Pernam Sivley, Tracy Hankey, Tracy Smith, Kristen Grabowski, Shannon Friedenberger, Bernadette McMecken, Kelsey Alton, Scott Stushnoff, Shalane Robichaud. Love that shot. Can please tell Kelsey I put him in one of the shows. And of course I mentioned the Degans before, and we saw Minnie Degans a few slides ago on her wedding day. Well, here she is in 1976. This is a shot from the Edgewood Innomilkland Women's Institute collection. And so many of those Dutch families, like the Deganses and the Donslers and the De Jagers and the shipmakers, such a huge part of the Hops, such a huge part of the farming history of the Innomilkland Valley. And you see that in this shot of the Edgewood school class. This is the turn of the 1960s, and a lot of those Dutch names are in here, and along with a lot of other prominent names that have been in the valley for so long. The Milnes, and the Jordans, and the Ferrers, Palishes, Fergusons, McFarlands. So I'll just let you absorb those names for those of you watching at home. Although this is on YouTube, you do have the power to pause. Yeah, just a great shot. And again, thank you so much for all those folks who hold on to all those great school photos and old Edgewood photos and old Arrowhead photos and old Cusp photos, and double thanks to all of you who write names on photos. That's one thing we're going to have an issue with as the years go by, and we'll have all of our phone photos. We'll have photos of the stuff on our phone. We might not necessarily remember who's in them unless we actually remember to print them out and write the names on the back. Another old Dutch family from Browse, the Rydens. And so you can see this is... I love this shot because it's really a perfect fusion of Browse and Edgewood in one photo. Because you have the Donslers, and the Rydens and the shipmakers. And the Bergwerfs. Because Mrs. Ryden, Sophia Ryden, was a Bergwerf. And the Bergwerfs were related to the Hogerwerfs, which is another family we'll get into here in a second. This would be the late 1920s or so. This is a shot of Browse School in 1928. And yes, for everybody under the age of 80, there was a Browse School located at Box Lake originally. And so you see, again, a lot of those names that we just saw in that last photo we see in this photo, along with other big Browse families like the Hohenleitners and the Eels and the Henkies. And again, everybody looks so excited to get their photo taken. Well, the people on the top look excited. The people in the bottom 3 rows don't. Wonder what made standing on the stoop so cool. There's the Browse girls basketball team. And probably coincidence, because Volkswagen wouldn't have been very big here in 1933. But that Browse women's logo looks very much like the Volkswagen logo, doesn't it? But we've got Gertrude Henke, Rose Lensley, Sophie Ryden, Martha Hascarl, Alberta Hascarl, Dorothy Hansen, Mary Haynes, and Margaret Ryden. And the classic 1930s hairstyles there. And I mentioned Margaret Ryden, I mentioned Sophie Ryden, and Sophia Ryden. Margaret Ryden goes on to become Margaret Steenhoff, which, of course, is another Dutch family. That's so important in our valley over the past century. And Sophia Ryden was crowned the Centennial Queen of 1958, BC's 100th anniversary, so the Cusp had a Centennial Queen pageant instead of the regular Queen, now Ambassador pageant competition. And there she is, being crowned in a very ornate robe. And I mentioned the Steenhoffs, and all these folks dearly missed. This is taken at the Cusp Grand School reunion in the auditorium, August 1981. So this was a special reunion held for everybody that went to school in the what is now the Centennial Building, which housed various iterations of the Cusp Public School and the Cusp High School and the Cusp Elementary School between 1910 and 1956. I mentioned the Hogerwerfs. This is a great shot. Jan Hogerwerf would be third from the top left here. And This is a photo as they get ready to emigrate. April 1907, bound for Canada. And there's the Hogarworth house. This was one of the first photos I ever took in working at the Historical Society back in probably would have been early 2013 or so. But yeah, what a great old shot. And yeah, that's way down on Browsloop Road nowadays. There's Boca Hogarworth, who would eventually change his name to the much more pronounceable Derek the Graph and become a professional photographer in Vancouver. And I think I mentioned that in the last show. But this is an awesome shot of him in the 1920s with a saxophone. And he was one of the main musicians in the Cusp and a member of the Cusp band. This is his brother, Joe Hogarworth, who would later change his name to Hoover when he moved out to the Okanagan. And he's standing in the doorway of his laundry. And this was located at 305 Broadway Street West, and so that's a building that's now occupied by Touch of Fashion. So that building has always had a connection to clothing retail. You go from Hogarworth Cleaners to later with Lang's Clothing, Crafts Clothing, Dunn's, Matheson's, Paul's Menswear, and then, of course, Touch of Fashion. It's that location. And then finally, in this section, we ended off with, we think this is constructing the road along Box Lake in the 1910s. So once again, Boca Hogarworth is in this, so is Jan Hogarworth. But we also see Nick Donceler, and we also see Carl Alton, and then we see Paul Hankey and Flett Kroll, Jim Vestrup, Lyle McDougall, who used to run the Leland Hotel, Byron Boyd, Tom Bowes, of course the Bowes/Friedenberger family of Glenbank, Tom Mole, and Phil Bwesnell, who was one of the Bwesnell brothers that owned the farm that is now Spicer Farm. So all these ties woven together in this great shot, and you can imagine what it must be like digging an entire highway out of the mountainside by hand. Could not have been fun, just hand and dynamite. So that leads us to our next section, road work. I think in the trailer that we, or the little promo blurb that we put up on Facebook, we asked the question of potential viewers, have you ever driven along a one-lane mountain gravel road? Well, you gotta dig that one-lane mountain gravel road first. And this is digging the roadbed out of the cliffside to build the Edgewood to Vernon Highway over the Monashee. This is just by Deep Creek. And not exactly excavators and rock drills. That is some harsh terrain, which is why it took a fair amount of time to build that road. The road didn't open until 1925. Before that, it was horse trails. So once they got it excavated, it looked kind of like this. And you can see where they've put a little corduroy bed there to put in a little trestle, and you can see some crew members working in the background. Again, not the widest. This is a great before and after sequence. This is all taken from a surveyor's photo book. These shots here that you're seeing. So here's before, and look at that terrain that you had to build a road out of. Now watch those two dead trees in the background. There's your after. And that all had to be hauled out by hand or by horse. And then, as the road gets wider and you can drive on it, you can see the little fore and aft road that they've built out of logs. And the two grooves in the road, like I said, one lane. And you can see an early automobile making its way along the road. Yeah, not exactly cement barriers. A bit more modern. This is another one of Hufty's great shots. This is in 1969. That is the town of Mackenzie under construction. Not exactly our area, but a great shot nonetheless. And I include it here because it's a lot of road work. Because you're building a town of 4,000 to 5,000 people from scratch in the middle of the woods. And so you see the future Highway 39, that's the straight line going right down the middle, is currently Mackenzie Boulevard today. And then you see the different neighborhoods and streets under construction. A few dozen houses laid down. Last time I was in Mackenzie was 2007, so it's been a while. Coming back into our area, still in Hufty Hewitt's collection, these are colossal snowbanks along the future Highway 31A at the ghost town of Zinkton. And again, snowbanks that you just can't fathom today. How do you even shoot the snow up that high to clear it? This shot, you can't tell where the snowbank begins and the mountain ends. That little snowbank way at the back, that's not a snowbank, that's actually the Eureka Peaks way off in the distance. If you look closely, you can see that the little bit of treed hillside actually goes in front of the peaks. So if it weren't for that, it would blend right into the snowbank completely. And then you can see that classic international station wagon up at front. And then you realize, oh, that's the size of the car and that's the size of the snowbank. My goodness. Going back about 70 years before that, into the late 1890s, this is a road, this photo from Andy Craig he's labeled it Lardo Pass. This is the road between Beaton and Armstrong Lake, where you turn off from the Trout Lake Highway. And that's what that looked like in 1890s. It's a little bit better now. Not that much, but a little bit. This is a great shot. And I was told somebody posted a similar shot, or maybe even this shot exactly, on the Lost Kootenays page. Again, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't know. I just hear this stuff second and third hand, but and that sort of, hey, I think I know that shot they're talking about. And yeah, so I found this one. This is a brand new, at the time, retaining wall built in 1927. Eventually it rotted away, of course. It's made of wood. But a bit better than the one that you saw in the previous. Going north of Beaton, then you hit the road to Camborne through the Fish River Canyon, the Complex. And this is on the Canyon Bridge, which pretty much looks the same today. This is 1920. So that's looking up the canyon. Looking down the canyon, we have this shot from June 2009, a fairly recent shot in the collection. Big rock slide actually cut off the hostel that was operating on the other side above Camborne. And so this all had to be cleared, and it was quite a big story. They were trapped for a number of days on the other side, and you could only fly out or climb out. And you see the size of the rocks on top of this bridge. And as you can see, someone has put on their mountaineering gear and climbed the rock slide on top of the road. Now, this section's called Roadwork, and here's a bridge that could use some work. This is a DNA logging truck. DNA logging, that was Doug Hakeman's outfit out of Revelstoke. And this is the bridge across Downey Creek. So this would all be under Lake Revelstoke today. Would have been flooded in 83, 84. And so there's an entire load of log poles in the creek and a truck about halfway in the creek and halfway out. Here's a bit. This one's a bit more somber. These are internees at the Edgewood Internment Camp in World War I, being forced to work on the construction of the Monashee Highway. Like I said, it ended in 1925. They finally finished the highway, but construction on that highway began using internee labor from the Edgewood camp. They were paid cents a day, and they were paid in vouchers that could only be redeemed at the camp store, which are, and of course, run by the government, so the government got all their money back. On top of interning people whose only crime was having the wrong last name. It was Ukrainian and Serbian descent people mostly. Anyone that was a citizen of Austria-Hungary, or had Austrian-Hungarian accent, or ancestry, I should say. Very similar to what happened to the Japanese in World War II. So this is not a proud photograph by any means. Taken by the Hughes brothers, who took so many photos of Edgewood and the Cusp and the trail between the 1910s and 1940s. This is a great shot of a CPR train going over Carpenter Creek near the Ivanhoe mine at Sandon. And you can actually see it's carrying a pile driver. Another great bridge shot. This is a train crossing the original Columbia River Bridge at Revelstoke. So not the railway bridge that we know now, but the one before it. A very classic, very awesome shot. And this is another one that comes from the Bill Robinson estate. Here's the next bridge, around 1910, being built. And of course, today, you go to Revelstoke, there's 3 bridges in a row. There's the original Big Eddy Bridge, which was the original highway bridge across the Columbia. Then the modern railway bridge, and then the newer Revelstoke Bridge, which carries the Trans-Canada today. But again, the size of that project, especially in 1910, is immense. Here's a much more precipitous bridge. These are the Sundstrom and Turner families at Burton. Don't know exactly what creek, but this is sometime at the end of the 1910s, and that's a long way down with no railing. Of course, you make these shows and you type in bridge. So this isn't exactly road work, but it is technically bridge work. It's a game of contract bridge. At the Hakeman House in October 1939. So Grace Hakeman in the back, that was her son's logging truck a couple slides ago. That was in the water. And we have Hunter Gardner Jr. and the Vipon brothers, Ed and Jim. Again, you don't see casual shots like this from around this time that often. So just capturing a casual moment like this inside somebody's home is pretty fantastic. So that's one of my favorite shots for that reason. This shot here from Pat Archibald of Trail, taken probably 1946-47-ish. This may be the best aerial view of Cusp from mid-century. One, it's a negative, so the resolution's fantastic. And 2, it's aerial, not very common for this time. And 3, you really get to see how small the Cusp is compared to what it would even be 10, 15 years later. You can see entire blocks where they've cut away the trees, but they never built the street because there's no houses to service yet. That's the original street grid of Cusp. We haven't built the Hydro subdivision or Columbia Heights or not even the Valhalla sub yet. There's no hospital at the bottom of the photo. So that you can see, and I'll move my cursor over here. If it shows up, it does not show up. So you can see in those 4 unlogged blocks at top center, there's one little patch. And that's the patch that was the Alton property, where Pearl Ryan's house is now. Everything else is as yet untamed. It wouldn't be another 10 years after this, 5 to 10 years after this, where houses finally started being built as we get into the baby boom and we start getting big families and they need places to grow. And that's when the Cusp really took off population-wise and they had to start building all of those different subdivisions. And you can see the different buildings. You can see the Legion Hall right at center, but there's no theater next to it. That doesn't come until 1955. And you can really see in the park, of course there's no arena yet, but you can really see the layout of the original Cusp golf course, which had 6 holes. Not exactly standard. This next section is called Chow Down. And when I was clearing out an old desk in my house, and I found some old takeout menus, believe it or not, that date probably from 89, 1990, something like that. My cursor did show up, okay. So you saw where I was pointing at then. Okay, and so I figured, yeah, we'll take some of these menus and then we'll use it to sort of show some old photos of restaurants and stores and other food-related items. But yeah, here's one of those menus I found. I found 2 old Lord Minto menus. And you can tell by the font that this was printed at the Arrow Lakes News, because it's the exact font of all the captions at the Arrow Lakes News at the time. But I could definitely go for a Super Minto pizza right now. I would tear all the pineapple and green pepper off it before I ate it, but to be fair, I'd do it with a fork, so that way the people I was sharing the pizza with could... who am I kidding? I wouldn't share the pizza. I'd eat the whole thing. But yeah, steak sandwich, Little Hunters, the Minto burger. Steak and prawns, which, believe it or not, is one of my 5-year-old niece's favorite meals. What 5-year-old loves steak and prawns? That was one of her first words, by the way. Salisbury steak. Escargot. I can remember my sister loved the escargot. Lord Minto. There's the Lord Minto. How much for a large? How much for a large? $19.95 for a large. So it's actually not that much different than now, 30 years later. But there's Bobby Nowak in front of the then Lord Minto Ice Cream Parlor and Delicatessen. This is about a week before it opens, in July 73. A year later, he would sort of leave the ice cream parlor side of it behind and focus on the pizza, and then bringing in steak and turning it into Lord Minto that we remember. But for the first year, it was ice cream, deli, pizza. And of course, it wouldn't be a photo from the 70s without a belt buckle like that, wouldn't it? There's the Minto, as I remember it. Of course, anybody that owns Our Colored Past has seen that photo in the book. Other than the change in color, the building looks pretty much the same today. And of course, that's the old Presbyterian church, before it was the Minto. Another menu I found. Frontier Fred's Restaurant in Revelstoke, BC. Which was one of our favorite stopping places when we were kids. And the connection to the Arrow Lakes with the Frontier, of course, that was part of the restaurant, motel, store complex, and it's still there today. But it was founded by the Tillon family, who was originally from Arrowhead. And And, of course, Frontier Fred, the mascot. The coloring contest, as you can see in the bottom right. Always had to enter the coloring contest. As we go to here, I always got the Wrangler, which was an open-faced beef sandwich on a thick slice of French bread. And you got, it was covered in gravy, and you got your peas and your potatoes and your corn, and it was $6. $5.95. It was quite the deal, especially when you're 10, 12 years old. It could fill, and short. It filled you up. And so I mentioned the Tillon family, and there's the Tillon logging truck in 1997, parked in front of the Frontier. So you're standing in the parking lot of the Frontier, Highway 23 curving in front of you, and then Highway 1 in the background. And then, finally, I found this. This is a laminated, which is why there aren't any prices on there, because that way, if it's laminated, you could write it and the prices on a dry erase marker and then wipe them off every time they change. But it's a laminated menu from the Wild Rose restaurant in Roseberry. And Kahlua sundae, and vanilla banana ice cream pie, chocolate ice cream pie. Oh, I'm hungry already. Yeah, and of course I loved me a good quesadilla from the Wild Rose. I still can't believe it's gone. I still expect to see it every time I drive through Roseberry. Fortunately, there are a lot of places that we do have today. Like the Hut. So this is around the time of its opening in 1968. The sign isn't even up yet. So this is the Hut brand new. And I mentioned Pearl Ryan, Pearl Foco. Well, there's her sister inside cooking at the Hut near the time of its opening. And somebody will correct me, but I believe she went on to run the Dairy Queen in Nelson. So, which makes sense, because it's the same type of deal. That's the place you get your ice cream. A classic drive-in. And there's the old soda fountain, the old pop fountain inside the Hut. And, look at that vintage Pepsi Cola logo. I wonder how much a fountain like that would go for now, in mint condition. Seems like something you'd see on American Pickers or something. And, there's Pearl. Yep. So this is inside the Bluebird. This is the Bluebird Cafe. Mid to late 1950s. The Bluebird is where the Valley Food Store is now. And this would have been at the time that the Obayashi family had it. So Pearl and Mildred in the front, and we don't know who is standing in the back, whose head's cut off, but you also see Con Obayashi at left. And then the old Wurlitzer in jukebox in the background. So that's a great shot. And a rare shot. Most people take shots of the outsides of buildings back then. You don't necessarily see the insides so much. Here's another gathering inside the Bluebird. And of course, I had that photo of the Steenhoff family back at the beginning of the show. August Steenhoff. Well, when she married, she became Auga Witt. And here's the wedding reception inside the Bluebird. And of course, it's wallpapered, because it's 1949 and everything was wallpapered back then. And is that B? Anton in the front. B. Steenhoff, B. Anton. It could be, well, it definitely looks like a Steenhoff regardless. But what a great shot. Everybody's smiling. And one of the better shots of the Bluebird you'll see, one of the few you'll see in color, again with the vintage Pepsi Cola sign, and that is the Bluebird boat on top of a parade float going in front of the Bluebird. So, the very meta shot. And that's the 1957 parade. And you can see the pastel colors of that shot, especially the off-color sky, remind me of the pastel colors of this wonderful birthday present I got for a certain milestone birthday a few weeks ago. So I want to just say thank you very much to the folks at Kasama Chocolate for this nice little gift basket. And the connection is that this is 2 of the 4 proprietors are from right here in the valley. Stefan Klopp and Oliver Koff-Kappas, and along with our friends Dom Voser, Vince Garcia. And they just opened up their first store front on Granville Island in December. So pretty good from making chocolate in Stefan's spare bedroom to now having their own store. And they just won 3 gold medals at the International Chocolate Awards. So we are all very proud of them. And Stefan hosts, actually, our website for the Early Historical Society. So he does a lot for us behind the scenes. So we just want to give one of our volunteers a shout out there. This is a shot that I use because it shows the rice bowl at center. So this is the that was a Chinese restaurant that existed from the beginning of the 60s-ish? Late 50s, beginning of the 60s? Or up until it tragically burned down in 1980. And that would be where the Columbia Basin Trust is now located in the Cusp. As you can see, next to it is the Imperial Service Station, where Hossingel's Bistro is now. But a great color shot from the Cusp at the turn of the 70s. Now we go way back to where you would actually have things like a combination candy shop and barber shop. This is on the waterfront in the Cusp, 1904, Jim Morrison's Barber Shop and Confectionary, which probably became Charlie Eel's Confectionary in 1908. And this is an interesting shot because not only do you have the dapper-looking gentleman standing in front of the barber shop, but you have that giant poster on the add-on on the side for Labor Day festivities at Sandon. And you wonder what a poster like that would be like in nowadays. Wow. It's too bad posters like that aren't around anymore. Here's another early restaurant. I don't know exactly what it's called. This was a Chinese restaurant located on Slocan Avenue. So that building would have been located roughly where the former Happy Buddha / Chickadee / the Cusp Dry Cleaners building that was just torn down a year and a half ago was located right across from the Leland Hotel. What's also interesting is that you see at the left the Canadian Bank of Commerce. That was the second version of the Bank of Commerce, and that was located on the back half of the lot, which now holds Homegrown Market. And that's a glass plate photo. Another shot taken from in front of the Imperial Garage. But you'll notice that building, this is about 1950, that building next to it is not the rice bowl yet. You can just see it peeking over that bus. It's in the Cusp Meat Market. Orville Harper's meat market there. And you get a nice shot of the Bluebird across the street. And where the Valley Food Store is now, and then the Cusp Motors, where you see the big Shell station and the Ford sign, which is still a service station to this day, the Cusp Auto Parts. That is the best looking shot I've seen yet of that part of downtown at this time in the mid-century, circa 1950. Which leads me to think it might be an Ichiroshi Ino photo, and that comes from the late Terry Ueda. And you'll be seeing a lot more items from the Ueda collection over the next few shows, I think. I had a shot of Joy's Red and White store a couple shows ago. This is another great shot from inside the store where you see all the food on the shelves. So you see that produce shelf along the window side, which is rare for a grocery store. But you can see through the window is a sign that says Kick. And Kick was a soda that was a pop that was popular mid-century somewhat in Canada. And that is the sign hanging off of the Broadway Cafe, which is now located where Selkirk College is. And then you see the side of the Masonic building beside it. So we know that Bob Joy, who is the proprietor / butcher, standing in the white smock at center. But if anybody can point out those other three folks in the photo, I would be much obliged. And now, of course, hotels, very often back then, before motels, basically every hotel you would go to would actually have a restaurant in it. Such as the Arrow Lakes Hotel, Edgewood. This is another Hughes Brothers shot, so that puts this probably in early 20s. And it was located directly to the left of the wharf as you got off the boat to come into Edgewood, downtown Edgewood. So this is right on top of where Dump Beach is now today. And it burned down in 1930, thereabouts. A few years later, south down the Lake Road, or going north up the Lake Road, in the Needles direction, just north of downtown Edgewood, was the Edgewood Hotel. And it only lasted about 8 years before it burned. It looks brick. It wasn't. That was facade. But that's a great shot of it. And as you can see, Edgewood Hotel, fully modern rooms and meals, as we continue with our chow down theme. Right in the Edgewood town site was the Edgewood Lodge. So Margaret Williams and her son Don ran this between 1951 and 1967. And this is a commercial postcard of the Edgewood Lodge. I mentioned the Crawfords of Arrowhead before, and this is a shot of their Union Hotel. As you can see, rooms and meals, and it also served as the general store. And this is 1952, and you see that Vernon to Revelstoke moving van parked at the hotel, which makes sense. It's a nice midway point on the journey between Vernon and Revelstoke. Going all the way back to 1910. This is the Dominion Sawmills company store inside Comoplex. So when you have a company that basically owns the entire town, that means they usually have company-owned businesses to serve their workers, and such was the company store. And of course, this is before the cash and carry days, so everything is behind the counter. You have to go to the counter and ask for it. And the shopkeeper will kindly take them off the shelf for you. Speaking of Kick Cola, this is a shot that we normally wouldn't have because it's a bit out of our jurisdiction, Perry Siding in the Slocan Valley, except it wound up in part of Milton Parent's negative collection. This comes from the Stushnoff family. This is John Stushnoff's Perry Creek store, probably in the 40s, thereabout. And again, I love those vintage Crush and 7-Up ads on the wall, in addition to Kit Cola and Pepsi Cola. And we go down to the very tip of Lower Arrow Lake. This is the Deer Park Resort store and snack bar. And yeah, of course I was going to miss one as I had to rebuild this entire show a half hour before we went on air. But there it is. Deer Park, summer 1965. This would have been taken by Charlie Watson, who worked for DC Hydro. And would have been when Hydro was in the... these would have been part of their survey photos, essentially, prior to the construction of the dam. So as we get into the last 30 or so slides here, a little free association, just some random photos that don't quite fit in the rest of the show, but I thought were interesting and that you might find interesting. This is a great shot of the Cusp Brand School reunion. We saw that shot of the Steenhoff family at the auditorium at the reunion banquet. Well, after the banquet, they had a big field day at Legion Park, which is now McDonald Creek Park, the former Morton Ranch. And you can see just a massive, massive turnout of people. Another great overhead shot. This is the Silversmith mine at Sandon in May 1928. Gives you an idea of the size of the operation and the pretty precipitous mountain slope that they operate on. When you drive into Sandon today, you can look up and you can see the path leading up to the old mine, and you realize just how high up it was above the town. Arrowhead. This is this is about 1960 or so, so it's definitely not the bustling Arrowhead that we saw at the beginning of the show of the Lakeview and City hotels with those postcards. But as you can still see, there's a few hundred people, couple hundred people there, and you can still see where the city blocks are and the highway going up to Sidmouth at the left, where the Columbia River enters Upper Arrow Lake. You can see where it's been noted on the photo, former Union Hotel. By this time, it is now passed to Tony Tamrick, who has turned it into the Red and White store. And so we stick with Arrowhead for this wonderful shot of two ladies on the wharf, early 20th century. Could you imagine getting that dressed up for a ride on, say, E-Bus or West Kootenai Transit today? Clowns are scary. Clowns are frightening. They're creepy. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. This is a shot from 1981 July 1st festivities next to the arena. And just the look on that clown's face as he stares into the camera. The camera doesn't even want to focus on him. That's how scared the camera is of the clown. This is another July 1st photo from 1909 when the parade was done on the waterfront on Bay Street. And of course, everybody works but Father. So, yeah. Nothing like a float that makes fun of lackadaisical parenthood. 1985. This is bed races. July 1st, along Broadway in front of the post office. This is one of the softball teams versus the, or it might be even the ambulance, although I think the ambulance actually raced in their uniforms in a race. But we definitely know it's quite obviously the RCMP on the left. And in the background, you can see the sign for the Dumont Motor Inn, the Dumont Hotel, which of course had a restaurant in it. That's where the Kuskinex, where the lodge is now, Kuskinex Lodge, Rotor Lodge, CMH Lodge. That sign was taken down in 1986, of course, when CMH purchased the hotel. And it sat in the woods across from Columbia Machinery behind the elementary school for probably 8 or 9 years. And I regret not being large enough at the time to actually grab the sign. Quite a bit bigger than I was then. But, yeah, really wish I could... That side. Yeah, so it... Yeah, and there we go. So that's Richard. So we now have confirmation. Okay, Richard Can is in that photo. I knew I'd get him in one of these photos one day. Here's some more people from that era that you may know. This is softball, slow pitch softball action at the what becomes the Kathy Peterson Park in 1983. And we have Dedaus Wilcott on first base, running in moccasins. He's playing in moccasins. Mary McCormick in front, and then way back in center field is Jody Scott. So this is a photo that when my mom was still with us, she actually, we sat down and we just went through all of, a few hundred negatives. We from the Arrow Lakes News, and before she got sick, we managed to pick out quite a few people. So this is a great shot. This is the year before, 1982, full color. This is, we are now fully into just embarrassing people that are still around by putting photos of them when they were much younger on the internet. The Mod Squad. And I always get a bit triggered when I see slow pitch softball photos, just because my parents played with the Mad Hatters and then the Fog Duckers, and my childhood was basically spent being drug around to various slow pitch tournaments around the West Kootenai and the Okanagan, where I just remember being bored for excessive periods of time. But yeah, that's a great shot, and of course, you can see the names. We all know these folks. It's a wonderful, wonderful shot. So I hope everybody gets a kick out of that. And I hope everybody gets a kick out of this. This is the Seldar minor hockey team, 1975-76. And, yeah, Tamara just mentioned her dad in the photo a couple slides ago. Well, there's her uncle playing goal. Hi, Hoss. Yeah, what a great shot. And we can thank Jay Delma for bringing us a whole bunch of classic shots of late 70s hockey teams that we have in our collection now. And so there's a lot more where this can go, where this comes from, but yeah, don't want to use them all in one show. Here's a much older hockey team. This is at Girard, 1915. What a fantastic shot. And amazing resolution as well. Not nearly the $200, $300 graphite sticks we see folks using today, that's for sure. And then going back to 1907 with the Ferguson women's hockey team. And we have all their names too, which is fantastic. But yes, Ferguson fielded the Ferguson Flyers. And they had a men's side and a women's side. And this is the women's side. Again, playing in full dresses and hats. Which is unfathomable today. Speaking of the Upper Lardo country, here's one of Andy Craig's men hauling wood in winter at Trout Lake in 1907. And if you've been up to Trout Lake, you've been up to Ferguson, you know how deep that snow gets and how long it sticks around. A great shot. 1938. Again, this is not something we would normally have, except it was in a strip of negatives. This is in Nelson, and this is the Hendricks Garage. motor freight truck. And Greg would be able to tell me where this building is. And then, of course, look at that vintage gas pump. Back when you actually just had to pull up to the sidewalk and fill up on the side of the street. This is the train station at Sidmouth, so just north of Shelter Bay today, if you see where Sidmouth Road is in that new residential development that's going in a few minutes past the ferry, that's high above the site of the original Sidmouth community, and you'll notice the road leading in is Sidmouth Road. And there's the train station. The train, of course, went from Arrowhead to Revelstoke along the east side of the river. So this would be on the east side of the Columbia River, opposite the Sidmouth school at Hall's Landing. Where am I here? And this is a great shot of A.R. Folkier, the cousin of Fred Folkier, who the Cusp first policeman who the town of Folkier is named after. He's posing with Giselle Devlin, who is the postmaster at this time. This is 1967. So this is Devlin's Ferry Service Station, which was the post office. This is right around where the Folkier rest area is now, at the ferry landing. And he is posing with the original map of Fred Folkier's Needles Ranch, which is what eventually was subdivided into what is now the town of Folkier. The Needles Ranch specifically is where the golf course is today in Folkier. But that is Fred Folkier's cousin in that shot. Here is the sidewalk being built along 6th Avenue. This is right in front of this is 1973, in front of what is now the BC Forests Timber Sales Office, and that house right before Cal Tire. There's no Cal Tire. Yeah. Greg's telling me that building that you saw the Hendricks Garage truck pulling up at is on Josephine Street, and it's the former Nelson Home Furniture, and it's been vacant for 10 years. But it's still around. So, as you can see, that's how that concrete sidewalk that you walk on in front of the forestry office that always gets flooded, well, it's 50 years old. That's a big part of it. It's sunken into the ground quite a bit, and you can see how deep this is. You really do need a retaining wall along it. And there's a bit of one. That house across from Cal Tire has a few rocks to sort of prevent the land from slumping. A couple of classic store shots from the mid-1980s found in a Halcyon House scrapbook. You have Green Door Sports Shop. It's Green Door Sport, later Saddle Mountain Sports, and of course now the McCusp General Store. And then you have McCusp Variety Shop, a couple buildings down the street, and that's where where the Arrow and Anchor is now. No, or it might be Mount Odin Cannabis. In my old age, I'm beginning to... It's painted green, and I can't tell, because it's green. But it's one of those two. John Nelson, of course, pioneer of Galena Bay, who we have hundreds of photos from in his family. This is his boat, the Olivia. The engine of the Olivia is down in the museum. This is at Pinkston, which is where Andy Simons, who Mount Simons, big ledge, is named after. And you can see Andy Simons and his daughters on John Nelson's boat in this photo. This is a shot of Jack and Marlene Allard at Sandon in August 1955. So this is right after the catastrophic washout that spelled the end of Sandon. And you can see the Virginia block and the Burns building and Black Store, the old Atherton building there. And again, you can see the ruins of the flume that formerly contained Carpenter Creek. The main street was on top of that flume. Very dramatic shot. Speaking of floods, that was a washout. Now we go to a flood. We saw the ferry service station with A.R. Folkier and Giselle Devlin. Here's the ferry inn across the highway from the service station, surrounded by floodwaters, 1948 flood. And then there's the service station, surrounded by floodwaters in the 1948 flood. And then this is the ferry dock that they are standing up on top of course. And then you see Highway 6 in the background. Alan Keffer towing his tugboat by tractor to Watchan Lake in 1929. And imagine towing a boat with a tractor up a logging road. But a very unique shot, to be sure. We mentioned the hops before, so we come back around. This is the Hop Brothers logging truck at Dump Beach in Edgewood, 1954, and of course that's where the log dump was, hence the name Dump Beach. And that is a very large and tall load of logs. That must have been fun to climb up on top of that to take that photo. I mentioned the internment camp. There were actually 2 iterations of the internment camp. This is the first iteration, which is a bit up the valley from the Edgewood town site. So that's what that looked like for. And of course, this is another Hughes Brothers photo. The second iteration was on top of what is now the Donsler Memorial Park. We always see photos of old St. Leon Hot Springs and the majestic cedar mansion that contained the hotel and the pools. Here's a more modern shot of St. Leon Hot Springs in the mid-1980s. Not as ornate, although that still is some pretty impressive rock work, to be honest. And then, of course, the little pipe feeding the water into the pool. We mentioned the Sidmouth ferry that connected the east and west sides of the river. Here's a group of men cutting a path in the ice across the river for the ferry to travel. And then you see the cable tower in the back that held the cable that the ferry ran on. And so we come to the end of the show with our final little set of slides. These are all shots from 100 years ago. It's 2021, so we go back to 1921 to end our show. We always see the Minto and the Bonnington together, the Minto and Rosalind together. Here's the Columbia, the Minto and the Bonnington together. It's like the Russian doll with Troshkas of steamships. One ship fits inside one ship, fits inside one ship. This is a great shot of the SS Rosebery being built at Rosebery in 1921. So you can see it in the back there at center. Here's the Edgewood Cenotaph, about a year old here in 1921. It was dedicated in 1920, and this sat right at the center of the main intersection in Edgewood, just as the Cenotaph used to sit in the center of the main intersection in the Cusp before they moved it. And of course, that Cenotaph here in Edgewood was taken apart and relocated to the new town site where it sits in the park to this day. Here is the Burton Ball Team, 1921, with, again, we saw Jack Allard at Sandon. There's his father on the Burton Ball Team, along with Bert Sundstrom, who we saw standing on the bridge earlier, Johnny McCormick, one of the baseball legends who John McCormick Park is named after in Burton, Sandy Robson, and all sorts of historic Burton names there. This is children at the entrance to Mrs. Appleby's house, West DeMars. So for those of you boaters out there, what you might know as the Bahamas across from McDonald Creek Park, that's where the West DeMars town site used to be. And of course here we see Edith Pratt, who became Edith Barrow, Eileen Murphy and Harry Murphy, the Sutherlands, the Browns. So some big Arrow Lakes names there. 1921, West DeMars. Here's a group of people on the wharf at Halcyon Hot Springs. Sid Leary, our longtime owner, timber magnate of the Arrow Lakes and former Minister of Public Works, the Islip family, and the Edwards family. So, super prominent in the Cusp residence here. I just noticed the couple at the center in the accusatory finger. Children of Hall's Landing School. So, Hall's Landing on the west side of the Sidmouth Ferry. What a great shot of the school class. And that's the entire school population right there. All one class. There were 3 schools at Sidmouth. There's the Hall's Landing School, the Crawford Creek School, and the Sproat School. And they were all little one-room schools like that. And then finally, it's spring, everybody. Yeah, let's get outside. We end it with a Hughes Brothers shot of tennis at Edgewood. And as you can see, well served. And that's an action shot. And can you imagine playing tennis in a dress that long? I certainly can't, but I've also never worn a dress. So, that's the show, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. We actually got it off the ground. Which is probably why you can hear me stumbling a bit. I'm just so happy it went off well. I hope you all enjoyed it. Our next show is going to be on Friday, April 16th at 7 p.m. And it's the Secret Show. Secret Show, you say? Yes. Back in October, we did a secret show over Zoom that only those people that were in that call got to see. Well, now everybody's going to get to see. And they're going to get to see it in high def, even if you were one of the very few on that Zoom call. You will now get to actually see the photos as they were meant to be seen in its proper definition instead of just a webcam aimed at a TV screen. And that show is called Street Signs and Sine Waves. So we will join you on April 16th, 7 p.m. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the volunteers that put in so many hours at the archives office or at home, taking materials home to work on them. Without our volunteers, the society simply does not exist. And you make my job a lot easier and, frankly, a lot more fun with all of your knowledge and your enthusiasm. So I just want to thank all of you so much for that. And I thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. So long, everyone.